for the total midterm election cycle. Next, going to look at presidential elections. The 2024 presidential primary election cost $13.3 million. The 2024 general cost $16.2 million for a total cost of nearly $30 million. And now that we know the totals of those elections, we're going to look at the voter turnout. So for the 2023 municipal general, we had about a 20% turnout. For the 2022 midterm, about a 40% turnout, and for the 2024 presidential, roughly 62% turnout. The midterm general election cost an additional 5.67% to run compared to the 2023 municipal general election and saw a 92% increase in voter turnout. The 2024 presidential general election cost an additional 73% to run compared to the 2023 municipal general election and saw a nearly 200% increase in voter turnout. So I'm going to turn it over to Kagan now for some more analysis.
So after we took the total cost of the elections for these 3 separate years and the voter turnout, we were able to do a cost per vote comparison between the municipal primary, the midterm primary, the presidential primary, and then conversely the municipal general, the midterm general, and the presidential general. And the 3 years we're always looking at through this for our portion is 2022 midterm, 2023 municipal election, and the 2024 general election. So looking at the municipal primary, the cost per vote, so that is just taking the total cost of the election divided by the total amount of voters. So that's going back a few slides. That's the 8.757 million divided by we don't have the voter turnout from the primaries because it's hard to compare primary voter turnout, but the turnout for that municipal primary. And the cost per vote is $27.81 in those municipal primaries. For midterm primaries, that cost per vote goes down to $13.42. And for the presidential primary, a slight increase actually to $16.52. So comparing those, the cost per vote in a municipal primary is 107.29% greater than a midterm primary election cost per vote and 71.14% greater than a presidential primary election cost per vote. And then moving on to the general election, those percentage differences do actually get greater. The municipal general election, you had a cost per vote of about $15.52. The midterm general election, you had a cost per vote of $5.26, and the midterm or presidential general election had a cost per vote of $5.47. So the cost per vote in a municipal general election is 195.06% greater than a midterm election cost per vote and 183.73% greater than a presidential election cost per vote. Moving on, we wanted to sort of highlight a county by county average in this. So in a municipal primary, in sort of the range you see throughout these separate elections. So this is a busy slide, but I'll go through and explain it. So counties in a municipal primary range from a lowest of $3.14 per vote in Boone County to the highest of spending $473.29 per vote in Whitley County for the 2023 municipal primary election, with a county average of $45.24. And then, so when I say county average, that is taking the cost per vote in each county and just averaging those, averaging that out. So slight discrepancy of just taking the total cost of the election divided by the amount of voters. The municipal general election count, the range was from the lowest of $1.58 per vote to the highest $557.60 per vote in Kosciuszko County, with a county average of $33.22. Moving on to the midterm primary election, the range was from the lowest of $2.93 per vote to the highest of $56.78 per vote a county average of $15.37. The midterm general, the range was from the lowest of $1.81 per vote to the highest of $48.96 per vote, a county average of $6.51. And then moving on to the presidential election years, which have the lowest range, you'll see. Presidential primary, counties range from the lowest of $2.77 per vote to the highest with $44.27 per vote, county average of $14.27. And finally, the presidential general election, the range was from the lowest of 67 cents per vote to the highest of $24.33 per vote with a county average of $5.39. After looking at the cost per vote, we looked at potential increases in voter turnout you could potentially see by moving municipal elections to even-numbered years, either a midterm year or a presidential year. So we looked at two things here. We looked at the number of voters who voted in the 2023 municipal general election, but did not vote in the 2022 general election. And conversely, we looked at the numbers of voters who voted in the 2023 municipal general election, but did not vote in the 2024 general election. Because we're assuming those are just voters who were interested in a municipal election issue, but aren't interested in maybe the national issues that pop up. So we found in the 2022 general election, there were 78,693 voters statewide that have voted in 2023, but did not vote in 2022. So that would have equated to a 1.65% increase in voter turnout. In the 2024, obviously, much higher turnout than a general election. So we only found 23,395 voters statewide that have voted in 2023 municipal general, but did not vote in 2024. So it would have only equated to a 0.48% increase in voter turnout. One thing we did not look at when accounting for this is campaign spending from local candidates that would have been an additional driver for voter turnout. Campaign finance at a local level is hard to come by throughout the state. There are only a few counties that report that online, so it's just not something we can have readily available. And then this study came from a piece of legislation through this past legislative session. And part of the discussion in committee is the ballot drop-off rate you could potentially see if you made the ballot longer. Obviously, there are a lot of races in midterm and presidential years, so adding a mayor's race, a city council's race, a clerk treasurer's race could see an increase. You could see an increase in ballot drop-off rates. People that go in, vote for the top of the ticket, maybe Congress, but just never get to the city council, the mayor's races. So we looked at some previous studies, and they had found that ballot fatigue might lead voters to skip lower profile races on a longer ballot, but the increased turnout you see in those on-cycle elections outweigh the effects of any potential drop-off. So having that main election, like a presidential or Senate race, draws voters in and increases the likelihood they will participate in those down-ballot races, even if some might succumb to that ballot fatigue that's talked about. So what we decided to do is look at some ballot drop-off races in a few competitive cities across the state in 2023, and then look at some ballot drop-off from the president to a county office and then the Senate to a township office in 2024 and 2022. So the three cities we picked to look at ballot drop-off in 2023 were Indianapolis, Fort Wayne, and Carmel, because there were three competitive mayoral races in these cities. We probably could have picked New Albany down here because I know that was a competitive mayor's race. So that'd be interesting to look at. But the drop-off from Indianapolis mayor to city council was 8.84%. And keep in mind that these years, you really only have two races on the ballot. So people are going in and you're only voting for two things. So you have an 8.84% drop-off from Indianapolis mayor to city council. In Fort Wayne, the drop-off from Fort Wayne mayor to city council was 8.73%, and the drop-off for Carmel mayor to city council in 2023 was 4.09%. So for the presidential year, we looked at president to county surveyor. What I was able to find is county surveyor is, I think, the lowest county office, like in terms of position on the ballot. So I found that would be a good one to pick. So the ballot drop-off rate from president to county surveyor in 2024 was 22.74%. And then for 2022, it's pretty easy because all township offices are elected in midterm elections. So we looked at the ballot drop-off rate from Senate to township trustee, and that was 19.56%. So obviously, the ballot drop-off rates in the presidential and midterm years are greater, but you saw the turnout numbers previously. You're looking at twice and three times the amount of voter turnout in these elections. So even if you have a ballot drop-off rate, more voters are voting in those mayor and would be voting in those mayor and city council elections. One contributing factor that we did look at in the discrepancy between the ballot drop-off rates between the different elections is the contested elections. So one thing we did see is 87% of the county surveyor races in 2024 were not contested, and 85% of the township trustees races were not contested. Contrasted that with 50% of the Fort Wayne council was not contested, 40% of the Indianapolis council wasn't contested, and only 17% of the Carmel council was not contested. So if you factor in all the contested races, there's likely a smaller difference between the ballot drop-offs in municipal elections compared to midterm and presidential elections. So that's one of the factors that could be explainable for ballot drop-offs. It may not be ballot fatigue, but the competitiveness of some of these lower offices. And we also wanted to mention, obviously, localities bear the biggest burden for the cost of elections, but there are state cost impacts as well. The BMV has to be open the Monday prior to Election Day, and Election Day for extended hours when there is an election per Indiana code. We have an application called Democracy Live that provides accessibility to site-disabled voters, and that is paid for per each election that is run. So we just pay $50,000 for each election, primary and general, each year. There's a cost for the statewide voter registration vendor to keep their help desk call center open for extra hours on Election Day. And obviously there's a cost for Homeland Security and law enforcement support on Election Day as well for the state. One thing we did want to mention, low voter turnout in municipal elections isn't just a problem in Indiana. It is a nationwide problem. We looked at some previous study of 340 elections from 144 cities from 96 to 2011. Looked at turnout in mayoral elections that weren't synced with midterm or presidential elections, and there was found an average turnout of 25.8%, which is in line with our voter turnout in municipal elections. And a separate study examined 332 mayoral elections in 38 large U.S. cities over 25 years and found a similar average of 27%. And then the final thing we looked into were various studies on the representativeness of the electorate in these municipal elections. Local elections with few races on the ballot can lead to selective participation and may produce a voter pool that is disproportionately comprised of those who care about the issues at stake in these local elections, allowing special interest groups, potentially allowing special interest groups to influence local elections more than they could have if there was a presidential or senate race on the ballot and a higher turnout. A few studies that we saw looked at this issue in school board races. Obviously, school board races are in even-numbered years in Indiana, so it's was hard to look at here, but school board races being off-cycle, and there were some data to that, and it found that teachers are 7 times more likely to vote in school district elections when they are standalone elections compared to the general public. So swap out teachers for local government employees for municipal elections, and you're probably looking at a similar number to that. And finally, studies show that voters in local elections are demographically unrepresentative of the electorate overall as well. So that is the end of our piece. So I will toss it over to the individuals from VSTOP here to talk about vote centers.
Thank you. Good afternoon. So my name is Chad Kinsella, and I'm one of the co-directors with my other co-director couldn't be here, Jay Baga, and I'm here with Matt Housley. So we're presenting on the research that we've done on vote centers. So again, the vote center study, so the goal is we're trying to analyze cost savings, if there are any, and effects on voter turnout by requiring all counties to use vote centers. So we're looking at several of the different things that have happened, with vote center counties and non-vote center counties. And it's nice. There's been some research into this, and we've got kind of some of the first vote centers that were introduced in Indiana started in 2006. So we have some things to look at. So the initial analysis objectives we were looking at, and again, Matt looked at a lot of this. At some point, I passed by his cubicle and I said, "Hey, Matt, we should do this vote center study. I'll give you the easy part." And anyway, so you'll see that he did not get the easy part. Anyway, it wasn't intentional, or at least as far as he knows. Anyway, so we're looking at election staffing, equipment usage, vote locations, estimated election costs, voter turnout, and voter experience. And we have some data that we looked at with all of these different things. So what we did is, in looking at this, is we looked at some statistical analysis. So we have vote turnout. There's a analysis called, and again, it's been used in a couple of other different analysis, like in Texas and Colorado. It's called difference on difference, and it's kind of looking across years and within years to look at some of the difference. We did some very simple stuff on MIT. They have a survey that they do their survey on the performance of American elections. And within that survey, they surveyed like about 20,000 people. They've done it every year except for 2018, since 2012. I said, "Why not 2018?" He said, "We didn't have the money." But anyway, so they have that. And so they have usually between 200 and 300 people that they survey from Indiana. And they have a large cross-section of people. And so we're able to, again, take people that are in vote center and non-vote center counties and compare them. And then we did some raw data comparison of election staffing, equipment usage, voting locations, and election costs. This is a very busy slide. And essentially what this is saying is, so all of the information that we used in this study is publicly available. So the Election Assistance Commission provides EVES data. And again, the EVES data it's actually, if you ever have time or interest in it, it's like they collect a large amount of election data for each election across the entire country. And so Indiana takes part in that. The MIT study that I had mentioned, turnout data collected by the Secretary of State's office, and different, I think, what is it, the CEB-9 forms, which is essentially it's a form that each county fills out about how much the election costs. So we have all of these are publicly available. We use all these, and again, I think the key thing is an important consideration. The analysis is only as good as the data that we can collect. So we're very reliant on what is provided. So there have been a lot of studies on it, and I will caution you that a lot of the studies that have been done on vote centers primarily come from Colorado. Colorado is the first state that introduced vote centers, and Texas. And Texas is easy because they have 254 counties, and they've about less than half have them, and then others, the majority don't. But because Texas, everything is bigger in Texas, including the number of counties they have, and it's a large state, so it's a good place to do some research, and there's been a lot of research that's come out of that. So the literature on turnout is very mixed. I know there's a lot of people that point out that one of the reasons to have vote centers is increased turnout, and again, so there's been a lot of variability in terms of what's been found with that. So some of the initial studies on vote centers from Colorado and Texas found very, very modest. Modest is the key word here. Increases in turnout, especially among infrequent voters. So again, very modest, and usually in kind of like your more not unusual, but off year maybe. So Texas has a constitutional elections in when we would have municipal elections, but it's the entire state would have them. And they found that there was a little bit higher turnout with vote centers in those places on those years. Research in California found that, again, that vote centers were associated with a modest increase in voter turnout. The type of election, which was very important. So what they found overall was that if you look at presidential elections, the turnout really didn't change at all with vote center and non-vote center counties. There were some impacts with midterms, and then if there were any impacts on turnout, it was kind of like on these very either special or off-year elections where you have, again, like your very, very low, the lowest turnout elections that would be done in places like either California or Colorado or Texas or really any state that would have them. Other studies examining in Indiana and in some southern municipal elections found that vote centers have no effect on turnout. So on voter experience, so one of the key things that was looked at too was if we're going to vote centers, do people like it better? And again, the literature, there's been a lot of different political scientists who've studied this. It's kind of been across the board. And I think the one thing that I would say, and I've got a personal story to throw out, I use my parents a lot, and they have no idea that I use them in class and I use them in stuff like this. But anyway, so a lot of the times vote center, it's all about the rollout. And again, like anything, so when a rollout is good, people tend to enjoy it a lot better. And if once you start vote centers, and if the rollout isn't so good, people don't like them. But overall, people seem to like them, especially over time. And again, Kenton County, Kentucky, where I'm originally from, my parents, in 2022, they introduced vote centers, and they had some problems in the vote center where my parents voted, and my dad had to wait an hour. And again, he knows that I'm interested in elections, so he lets me know of any of the problems he has with elections and the people running in them. So he said, I've been voting since 1968. I've never had to wait in line. I had to wait an hour, and I'm never voting again. We got him back in 2024, and I didn't hear any complaints after 2024, so it seems like Kenton County got their act together. But overall, kind of points that so people seem to like them, and again, there were some studies that were done that people like them. And again, just to kind of give you that comparison, so Larimer County in Colorado and Denver County both introduced vote centers at the same time. People in Larimer County loved it. Denver County had some problems, and they experienced problems in the rollout. And again, people didn't like it as well. And then, in fact, there was a study done on Harris County, which is where Houston is, and they found that people had negative experiences. They didn't like the wait time, and they didn't like it as much. So again, across the board, a lot of variability with how people, if people liked it, and under what circumstances. Election costs. So one of the things that also has been talked about is bringing in vote centers, and that they can bring down the cost of elections. And ultimately, there's been a lot of, this one is a little bit more consistent as opposed to the first two that I talked about. So overall, almost all the literature on this has found that there is a cost decrease by introducing vote centers. So there's been some studies in Colorado that basically found that vote centers ended up saving $2.83 less per voter in vote center counties, which is, again, that's per voter, so that's not an overall. But again, so if you add that by voter, that adds up very quickly. Indiana Fiscal Policy Institute, again, a little bit older, but 2010 concluded that there would be savings if Indiana counties went to vote centers. And there was a study that was done fairly recently on, again, I can't say that I've ever been to this town, but a guy at the University of Tennessee who runs their MPA program went to Farragut, Tennessee. They are in Knox County, Tennessee. They introduced vote centers and found that they saved quite a lot of money in their municipal elections when they went to vote centers. And then one of the last slides that I'll have, and then I'll turn it over to Matt. If you look over the last 12 years, this is a slide, again, so you can see the black line is the number of counties in Indiana that use precinct-based model, and then the red line is the number of counties that use vote centers. And you can see about 2020, the number of vote center counties have overtaken the number of precinct model counties. And again, I would also say even in Delaware County, where Ball State is, they actually just voted on and passed after several attempts. They're going to have vote centers, and I think Hamilton County voted on it. Might have been yesterday, and I can't recall. But again, so the trend is very clear that vote center counties have increased. And I think one of the other key things to say, so when vote centers were, the law allowing vote centers was introduced in Indiana, one of the key things that you have to have in order to have a vote center is you have to have electronic poll books, typically called EPBs. And so what has actually happened is like all 92 counties in Indiana currently use poll books. So every county is now equipped to go to vote centers. But again, you can kind of see that the trend is definitely in favor in vote centers. And again, Delaware County kind of speaks to that. We've home, if you will, up in Muncie, Delaware County has once the state approves it, which we expected, they expect that they will, that we will be another vote center county. I'm gonna let Matt take it over from here.
All right. Just real quick, I just want to state a few things before I get started. I don't think any of you were thinking you were going to come here and get an election research methods class today, but that's actually what you're getting today. And so you're going to have to listen to a little bit of lecturing, but my goal is to make this as smooth as possible for you all and understanding. My slides are very heavy. There's a lot of text. There's a lot of information, but it's because these slides will be going to the state legislature in our final report, and I wanted to make sure that those slides were exhaustive and had the information that was needed. So just as a heads up, for some of you that are there in the back, you may not be able to see and or read these slides because there's so much on them, but that is okay because I'm going to walk you all through it. And honestly, it's probably for the best that I walk you through it because there's a lot on there. So I just wanted to let you all know that ahead of time. And of course, if you have any clarifying questions during that public comment period, that would be the time to ask. So, all right. Our first analysis that we looked at and what we wanted to kind of investigate was during presidential general elections. And we wanted to take a look and we wanted to see, was there a difference in counties in 2016 that used a precinct-based model, but then throughout those 4 years or those 8 years in between to 2024 switched to vote center models. And we wanted to look to see if there was a difference in the amount of poll workers that were utilized. And again, so we are taking this slide. You will see these a lot on here. These are just showcasing the data, what counties were eligible for that data. Any data that was incomplete was not included in our analysis. So that's why I do list up here the specific counties. Any counties that we were able to have complete data sets to be able to do the analysis on were included. So this analysis looked at the 36 counties. So these 36 counties used precinct-based models in 2016, and then over the course of 2016 to the 2024 general election, then switched, and in the 2024 general election began using vote centers. We also decided to use a control group because it's always good to have a group of counties that did not switch. So that way we can actually look at a fair comparison between the counties that switched and the counties that did not switch. So we had 22 counties that met the criteria in this study. I will say, just since we're here in Clark County is going to be utilized in this as the control counties very frequently because they are one of the few counties that do not use vote centers. So just want to let you know that. So this looked again at 58 counties total. So here's what we found. These 58 counties that were utilized, we found that the vote center counties used on average 19% fewer poll workers than the counties that did not. So we wanted to do this same exact thing, but we wanted to break it down because there are 92 counties, and you know that not all 92 counties look the exact same. We have counties with 5,000 voters, and we have counties with nearly 400,000 voters, right? And so we really wanted to try to break it down by size to see if there was any noticeable differences based on small counties, medium counties, large counties, and extra large counties. So the data that we utilize for this is the exact same counties, so the exact same counties that were eligible prior, but we broke them down into size categorizations. What we did is we utilized an 8-year average turnout. So we took these 8 years, excluding 2020. All of these analyses exclude 2020 because, as we know, 2020 did not look like a normal election. The way the polling places were set up, how many poll workers were needed, everything like that looks so different than what the average election looked like. So 2020 was not included in this analysis. But we took the other turnouts for 2018, 2022, 2024, or 2016, 18, 22, 24. And we did an average turnout. And the reason that we use turnout instead of registered voters is because we have a turnout problem in this state, right? The registered voters could be, 100,000, but only 40,000 people are turning out every single year. So it doesn't make sense to do an analysis on registered voters when we're not even reaching close to the total number of registered voters. So all of the analysis that you're seeing from me today is using voter turnout, who actually came to these elections. So we did an 8-year average turnout, and these are the sizes that those counties were grouped into. So what we found, so when looking at our small counties, so these are counties that had 2,000 to 14,999 voters on average turnout over that 8-year period. What we found is that they used, again, the counties that switched used approximately 37% fewer poll workers. But again, yet again, our precinct counties are also running efficient elections. They also use fewer workers, but use 12% fewer poll workers. So when you take that 37 and subtract it from that 12, as you can see, our small counties that switch from vote centers to precincts used on average 25% fewer poll workers. So again, a quarter less poll workers were utilized for our vote center counties versus our precinct counties. When you're looking at the medium counties are 15,000 to 499,000 voters that turned out in that average. This was a pretty significant decrease for both our precincts and our vote center counties. So our vote center counties that switched used 28% fewer poll workers, and our precinct-based counties use 26% fewer poll workers. So that related that for our medium-sized counties, on average, they used about 2% fewer poll workers, or if you look at the numbers, about 6 fewer poll workers on average than our precinct-based counties. Our large counties looked at counties that were 50,000 to 999,000 in that 8-year average turnout. This was a pretty significant difference that we found here in the actual raw data. So we don't have a lot of large and extra large counties in Indiana that fit this criteria, so I actually listed the counties there. So we have Hendricks, Porter, and St. Joseph County that were switched, and the only county that fit this criteria here was Monroe County in this 8-year average turnout. So again, what we could see is that those 3 counties used 234 fewer poll workers, and in Monroe County, they used 160 more poll workers. I was actually able to contact Monroe County, and they added 9 additional voting locations, and so that is why they had to increase all of those amounts of poll workers. But as you can see there, we couldn't really do a comparison analysis, but just on the raw data, those 3 counties used 234 fewer poll workers on average than they did in 2016. So I would consider that to be pretty significant. In our extra large counties, again, the comparisons become even fewer. And we actually, as you see here, the switch county, Marion County, actually used 14% more poll workers. And, I am not sure why that is. It could be that the turnout was higher. They needed more. They were expecting a contested election, so they needed more poll workers. I'm not going to claim to know why they used more. But our precinct-based counties, Allen, Hamilton, and Lake, actually used 15% fewer poll workers. So our precinct-based counties actually used fewer poll workers than Marion County when they switched. And I will just say, when looking at the precinct-based counties, specifically in the medium, large, and extra large counties, it's very common that they do this process called super precincting. So super precincting is where you may have 4 or 5 or 6 precincts that are all voting at the same location. It's almost like a vote center, but because they're not a vote center county, they don't call it a vote center, but that's really what it is. And so super precincting can really impact how efficient these elections are. And over the course of what you'll see, there's no question that Hamilton and Allen County and Lake County are arguably running the most efficient elections in the state, and they are currently using precinct-based systems. But I just wanted to kind of note that for that. So we did the exact same thing in the midterms, because we wanted to see, is there a noticeable difference in the poll work, because midterm elections may be a little bit smaller than presidential elections, so we wanted to see the effects there. So again, utilizing the same data, this time we had 19 counties that switched from precinct-based to vote centers, and then 23 control counties. Again, Clark County being one of those control counties. So what we found is, again, a very pronounced effect in the counties that switched from precinct-based in 2018 and then began using vote centers, and then were using vote centers in the 2022 election, used 39% fewer poll workers. If you actually look at the raw data, on average, from 2018 to 2022, counties were using 78 fewer poll workers on average. But our precinct-based counties, they were also, of course, again, ran efficient elections. So in 2018 to 2022, they used 63 fewer poll workers on average. But when you actually take a look at the counties and how large those counties were, how many poll workers were being used, that's why you see such a large difference between that 39% and 17%. So that gets you, on average, counties that switched from precinct-based to vote centers used on average 22% fewer poll workers than the counties that stayed precinct models from 2018 to the 2022 midterm. So again, we did the same thing. We broke it down by size. That's just the same. It's the exact same size categories that we used previously. So our small counties. Here, our small counties use 37% fewer poll workers when switching. Our precinct-based control counties used 14% fewer poll workers, which equated to a 23% fewer poll worker average when looking at our small counties. When looking at our medium-sized counties, we found that, again, we see a very large decrease in the amount. So counties, medium-sized counties that switched from 2018 to 2022 used 41% fewer poll workers. And our precinct-based counties use 29% fewer poll workers. So subtracting those numbers, you get 12% fewer poll workers on average. So again, as you're seeing, the trend is between about 30 to 40% fewer poll workers when these counties switched from vote center or precinct-based to vote center models. Our large county analysis isn't great because we only had 2 counties that actually met this. So St. Joseph County, I believe, they switched, I think, in 2020. Don't quote me on that. I think it was 2020. So in 2018, they were using precinct-based model, precinct-based, and in 2022, they were using vote center. That is a staggering number. 438 fewer poll workers were needed in the 2022 general election versus the 2018 general election. For the non-vote center county, it was only one that met this criteria. It was Monroe County, and Monroe County had 48 fewer poll workers from 2018 to 2022. So again, 34% fewer poll workers. Again, this is only based on these 2 counties, though. So when you're not really averaging, you're getting 2 very specific cases here. And in our extra large counties, we didn't have any counties that actually met the switch criteria because Marion County switched in 2018. So they, in 2018 and 2022, they were using vote center models. So we actually couldn't complete an analysis there. So then we wanted to look at 2024 specifically. We wanted to give the legislators really the most recent analysis we could. And so we decided to break it down even further, looking at 2024 and only 2024 specifically. So again, before we were looking at switches from 16, let's just take a look and do a raw comparison based on our vote center counties in 2024 and our precinct counties in 2024. This is just the data that was utilized for that. So again, we use the same size groupings. This is what I want to tell you all. We use the same size groupings, but this time you may see a few counties have switched spots. And that may be because their 8-year average turnout was low, but their 2024 turnout was high. and we're only using the 2024 turnout in the 2024 analysis. For example, I will just state Clark County was a medium-sized county based off of their turnout of the 8-year average. They had a higher turnout in 2024, and they actually moved up into the large category in 2024, right? So just as a heads up, you may see some counties that have switched, and that's because we're only using the 2024 turnout data for this analysis. So this is, like I said, this is hard to see, but I'm gonna actually break it down here into some specifics for you. So on the next slide, that'll actually give you a better idea. So what we found is that on average, the small vote center counties, the medium vote center counties, and the large vote center counties all serviced more voters with fewer poll workers. So that's what we were able to notice. So we did a voters per poll worker. So we took the number of poll workers and we actually divided that by the turnout in each county to get how many voters were serviced with the number of poll workers that were used. So small vote center counties used 3 fewer poll workers, but were able to service 58 additional voters, or did service 58 additional voters. Medium vote center counties, this was really pronounced. They used 41 fewer poll workers on average in 2024 than their precinct-based counterparts, and they were able to service 80 additional voters per poll worker. In large vote center counties, they were able to use 198 fewer. So again, this is simply 2024 large vote center counties used on average 198 fewer poll workers than our precinct-based counties. And they were able to service 94 additional voters, and then our extra large counties, again, huge difference, because they were servicing, they used 464 more poll workers. And many of those poll workers, I will state, came from Marion County. And I believe that was because, again, when you looked at that 2016 to 2024, they increased that number of poll workers. That's why we're seeing that there. And so they serviced 41 fewer poll worker or voters per poll worker. Again, I just want to comment on that super precincting. So Allen, Hamilton, and Lake use precinct-based, and they do a lot of super precincting. So, you know, I will caution you on the extra large counties because we only have 4 or 5 counties to go off of. So overall, here's what we found in election staffing. So let's kind of do a high-level overview. What we found is that vote center counties do, on average, require, and maybe the word require is not the right word, they did utilize fewer poll workers. So it may not be that they necessarily require fewer, but the way the counties are administering these elections show that they are using fewer poll workers than our precinct-based counties. We did see there that in our large and medium and large size counties, they have our small and large counties, they have the largest effect. So on small and large counties, switching to vote centers can have a pretty pronounced effect for those counties in terms of their staffing. And then again, we saw there that the large non-vote center counties ended up servicing more voters with more poll workers than the precinct-based counties. So again, Hamilton, Allen, and Lake running very efficient precinct-based elections. So the next thing that we wanted to look at was equipment usage, because again, we were supposed to analyze cost savings, if any. That's what the state law required us to do. Here's what we found. We found that we really couldn't do a solid analysis on this, and here's why. Equipment costs vary differently across the counties. So some counties may have yearly service contracts. Some counties have day of service contracts with their vendors. Some counties have every other year preventative maintenance contracts. Some counties have election day support, early vote support, tabulation and post-election support. There is just so many varying ways in which our counties actually do their voting system contracts, their voting vendor and electronic poll book vendor contracts, that there's just no equal way to measure it. We also want to state that transitioning from a precinct-based to a vote center model isn't going to change the equipment that they've already bought. Okay, so if they're running precinct-based elections now and they switch to vote centers, they already have all of the equipment they need to run, we'll say 40 precincts, so they're going to be able to run an election with 20 locations with the same amount of equipment. So again, what we found is that they've already purchased this equipment, and on average, voting systems life cycles are anywhere from 12 to 20 years. So, the equipment that they bought just last year, if they're a precinct-based county, is still going to be probably the similar equipment they'll use for the next decade. So it doesn't really make sense. There's no cost savings there for the counties. For counties that use direct record electronic systems, so you all do not use that here in Clark County, but we have a few county clerks who I see in here who definitely do use DREs. They're going to be utilizing the same amount of equipment most of the time. So in Delaware County, when we actually just learned that they approved their vote center plan, they had 47 locations that they utilized when they were a precinct-based system, and now they are actually moving to 26, I think, was it 22 or 26 locations now in Delaware County. But Clerk Spangler has already stated that they plan to deploy the same amount of machines. So even though they are switching, they know that they're going to have to service more voters at these locations. So they're still using the exact same amount of equipment. What we did find, though, is that counties that use optical scan systems, which you do here in Clark County, we may find that they may need fewer scanners, because the way the scanners work and how quickly those ballots go into the scanner, they may say, you know what, in the long-term investment, we may need 10 fewer scanners than what we were doing for a precinct-based system. But again, nothing conclusive enough for us to be able to draw any real conclusions. So then we wanted to take a look at voting locations, and I think that this one's going to be pretty self-explanatory here. But we were able to utilize all 92 counties. Currently, in 2024, 66 counties used vote centers and 26 counties used precinct-based models. That number looks different when you look at 2025, because we now have 68 counties, 69 with Delaware being included, but we're looking at 2024. So that's why it's 66 counties and 26 counties. Again, we utilize the exact same breakdown, so the counties look exactly the same in terms of that breakdown. This next slide here that you're going to see in just a second is a very busy slide, and so I do kind of want to break it down for you. But what we really notice is that on average, small vote center counties used on average 2 fewer locations. Medium-based vote center counties used 9 fewer locations than precinct-based counties. Our large counties used approximately 4 fewer locations, and our extra-large counties used approximately 24 fewer locations. And I will just state, for example, Allen County is an extra-large county in our state, and I believe they had just about 100 locations that they serviced in their precinct-based model, and I think they were trying to get that down to something like 56 or 46 locations. So that's a significant drop in the number of locations that Allen County would be servicing. So really in the extra-large counties is why you see it, because they have so many voters and so many locations, because they have so many precincts. That's why the effect seems to be greater for those extra large counties. We did decide, I did just want to show it to you in visual representation that you can see. So the black, that is the non-vote center counties, and the red is the vote center counties. So as you can see, the set of graphs to the left is looking at small counties, and the set of graphs to the right is looking at medium-sized counties. So as you can see, small counties, they have way more precincts. So small counties, even though the vote center counties have way more precincts, yet have fewer locations. And so I think that showcases the ability for vote centers to be efficient, is because they have way more precincts but are still operating fewer locations. As our medium counties, they have on average the same number of precincts. One I think is 45, the other's 48. So they have on average the same number of precincts in those counties. But again, as you can see on there to the right, the little bar chart to the right there, you can see they use much fewer locations. So our medium-sized counties, they're using significantly fewer locations, even though they are having about the same number of precincts. We did the same thing for the large and extra large counties. As you can see here, the extra large are large counties. So Clark County would be in that. They have a lot of precincts. Okay, they have a lot of precincts. But again, they're using fewer locations. Not many fewer locations when compared to the precinct-based counties, but still fewer. And then our extra large counties, as you can see as well, are servicing. They have a lot more precincts on average compared to the non-vote center counties, yet still are operating fewer locations. So summarizing this, what we found is that, again, I think that this would be the pretty common consensus is that vote center counties are using and operating fewer locations than precinct-based models, and it really, really is noticeable in medium and large counties. And then again, what we did find is that there really may not be, though, a huge savings on locations because many of these counties are getting these locations for free. They're public schools, police stations, fire stations, right? These are things that they're not having to charge to use. And then there are a few counties in which schools, police stations, and stuff like that may actually charge them a fee, a security fee or something like that to use those locations, or are using churches, community centers, and other things that may require to be paid for. But the problem is because the data is so varying on what counties actually pay for what locations, there really is no substantial savings for counties that are switching to locations or expenses for switching to fewer locations. Doesn't mean that it can't happen. It's just saying that we weren't able to see that on a large scale looking at our state analysis. All right, bear with me, y'all. We're getting through this. I told you all you're going to be in elections research methods class, and here we are. So hopefully you're all hanging on. So then we decided to actually take a look at, we just did a big poll worker analysis on the numbers of poll workers. So let's decide it, and let's take a look at the actual cost. This is, again, just showcasing the data that we utilized. So what we found, we were able to utilize the Secretary of State's survey data. So we appreciate them sending that out. And we were able to utilize 50 counties for this 2024 poll worker cost analysis. 32 operated under a vote center model, 18 used a precinct-based model. So again, utilizing this data, what we did is we took the reported base poll worker base pay. So for all of you who don't know, there are some different positions in the elections office. So you have clerks, you have judges, and you have inspectors, and those positions get paid sometimes differently. So the inspectors sometimes get paid the most, and the clerks will get paid the least. There are also typically only one inspector at each polling place, and there may be 6 clerks that are working at that polling location. So we thought, let's use the lowest number. Why not? We don't want to take the highest number paid employee if there's only one person at each polling place. We decided to use the clerk's pay. So we took the lowest base pay because we realized that's where the significant amount of pay is going to be coming for these counties, is because they have to employ so many clerks to work the polls. So we actually took that number and the base pay, and we multiplied it by the number of poll workers they use. So if a county paid their poll workers $100 for the day, and they had, 5,000 poll workers, well, that would be $50,000 that they spent on the election, right? And so that's what we did. We just did a simple multiplication there. We did use the county's CEB9 data, so every county is required to submit a CEB9, and it says, what was the estimated cost of this election? So we utilized that report and said, okay, this is what the county is estimating on their elections. Let's divide that by the poll worker pay, and then we can get an average. So this is a hard slide to read, so I am going to just kind of walk you through it. But what we found is that counties, precinct-based counties, they did service more voters on average than the vote center counties and required more poll workers to do so. That makes sense on its face, right? You're servicing more voters, so you're going to need more poll workers to do that work. But then when we actually broke it down by voters per poll worker, because this then standardized our measures across the county, regardless of if it's small or large. We did it, break it down to voters per poll worker. When we actually did that, we found that the vote center counties actually serviced 35 more voters per poll worker. So that demonstrates a greater efficiency. So again, on the first glance, when you look at it as a whole, Yeah, it makes sense. Okay, you have more voters, you need more poll workers. But then when we actually broke it down to vote center versus non-vote center, and we broke it down to poll workers per, or voters per poll worker, that's where we found that actually our vote center counties were servicing about 35 more voters per poll worker. As a result of this, the precinct-based counties also spent nearly 50% more on poll worker costs when compared to vote center counties. So this is a pretty unique comparison here. Both vote center and non-vote center counties, on average, spent approximately, this is on average using our CEB9s and data, so this may not be 100% representative of the real cost of the election for every single poll worker in every single county in all 92 counties, right? So I always got to disclaimer that. But we found that on average, they used about 19% of their budget, their election budget, on poll workers. And I bet it's a little even higher than that when you look at the amount of inspector pay and et cetera. But they used on average about the same number of poll worker costs. About 19% of their estimated budget was spent on poll workers. And precinct-based counties spent about $12,000 on their poll worker, pardon me, I want to make sure I get my numbers right. Vote center counties spent about $19,000 on their poll worker cost, and the non-vote center, so our precinct-based counties, spent approximately $28,000 on their poll worker cost. So vote center counties are using, are spending a lot less money on poll worker cost than our precinct-based counties. And I actually did a cool little comparison. And we found that on average, the vote center counties in 2024, they needed about 113 poll workers to run the election. Our non-vote center counties needed about 199 poll workers on average. So that equates to an 86 average poll worker difference. So I took that $86 and or the 86 poll workers, and I multiplied that by the average base pay for the vote center counties. And what did it come out to? It came out to just about $12,000. So we could really equate these cost savings and the poll worker cost to the actual number of poll workers that are being used. So again, I took those 86 poll workers that were not utilized by the vote center counties, and I multiplied that by the $139 base pay, and it got about $12,000. And I was like, well, that pretty much makes up for the discrepancy in the counties and how much money they're spending on their staff. We also wanted to take a look at cost per voter over a 12-year span, again, not including 2020. So we were able to use all 92 counties' turnout data. Again, we used turnout data from 2012 to 2024, and then we used the estimated budget for the election. So just like Dustin and Kagan did, it was very simple. You take the estimated budget of the election, and you divide it by the number of voter turnout, and you get a cost per voter. So here's what we found. What we found is that on average, the cost to run an election for precinct-based counties, that's that black line you see, is trending upward. And the cost for vote center counties to run elections is trending downward. Now, this is a trend line using 12 years of data. Elections have been going on for a lot longer than that. And so I will say that I caution using the trend line to say that generally speaking that they are going more expensive or less expensive. But that's what the trend line is showing. But I don't want you all to really take that and run with that, because I would caution you on that. But what I will say is you can see that the cost of the elections for vote center and precinct-based counties follows the same ebb and flow. So when vote center counties used and spent more money on their elections, so did precinct-based. When precinct-based counties spent less, so did vote centers. So the graph is running the same way. And so what we found is that in 2012, the counties that were utilizing vote centers had an average cost of approximately $1.58 more. At this time, there was only 4 counties using it. They were probably trying to figure it out. And then before you know it, as the amount of counties increased using vote centers, the costs per voter savings started to present themselves. So in 2014, counties that were using vote centers saved on average 45 cents per voter. In 2016, vote center counties saved on average 88 cents per voter. In 2018, they saved on average $1.02 per voter. In 2022, they saved on average $1.34 per voter. And in 2024, it was the greatest increase in gap that we have seen since in the last 12 years, in which our vote center counties on average spent $2.04 less per voter on their estimated election cost. That total average equates to about $1.48. So over the 12-year average, vote center counties saved about $1.48 per voter, which somewhat aligns very closely to the data and the literature that we've seen in other states, that it's about between $1.50 and $2 per voter that it could save on switching to vote centers. We were able to actually confirm the other literature from other states by looking at our analysis. We did decide again to look at it on a 2024 micro level. Let's look at what just happened here in our county. We also decided to break this down based on system. So we decided to break it down on counties that are using direct record electronic systems versus counties that are using optical scan systems as well. This is just, again, showing that breakdown. It's the exact same 2024 breakdown that we've always had. But again, since this is going to the legislator, I want them to know for each analysis exactly what data we utilized. So here's what we found. This is kind of a confusing slide. So what we did is we broke it down by system. So again, this is only using 2024, and this is breaking these counties down by their size based on their voter turnout in 2024. We found that DRE counties saved on average 80 cents per voter, vote center counties that use DREs. For counties that use optical scan systems, they saved $2.33 per voter. Medium-sized counties that do use direct record electronic systems in Indiana saved on average $2.27 per voter in 2024 versus their precinct-based counterparts. And then the optical scan counties also saw a significant cost savings at $2.85 per voter. In the large counties, so again, we don't have any large counties that fit the turnout size that use DREs, but we did have them that use optical scan counties. In the large counties, they ended up having a greater cost, so it was more expensive for large optical scan vote center counties to run their elections in 2024. We did not have any extra large DRE or any extra large optical scan counties because they're all the same. So all of the extra large counties currently are not using vote center or precinct based that fit the requirements. So again, because we only have such a limited data set, we didn't have any counties that were in those categories. When we did just break it down generally based on, okay, let's look at direct record electronic systems because we have those in Indiana, and let's look at optical scan systems in Indiana, we found that the average cost per voter for counties using direct record electronic systems in 2024 was $4.05. And for counties that used optical scan systems in 2024, the average cost was $7.65. This was irregardless, that statistic was irregardless of whether they were a vote center or not. We just wanted to see, was there a difference in how the systems and the cost of the elections? That bottom right chart is then when we broke it down by vote center and non-vote center. So what we found was that our vote center direct record electronics, they spent on average $3.62 per voter, and our precinct-based DRE systems had a cost of $4.57 per voter. So again, as you can see, our vote center DRE counties were spending less per voter. And then in our optical scan systems, we also saw that our vote center optical scan counties spent approximately $7.47 on their elections compared to their precinct-based counterparts that was $7.90. So what did this tell us? Overall, the cost of the elections ebb and flowed the same regardless of their voting method and type. We also found that the length of time a county has been a vote center has not changed their costs. So a county that was a vote center in 2006, it's not like they're spending significantly less now in 2024. So there was no difference really in the length of time that a county's been a vote center. It did not change that cost per voter. What we found again was that over that 12-year period, vote center counties saved on average $1.48 per voter. And then we found that, again, caution you, but over time, the precinct-based counties are becoming more expensive to run elections, and the vote center counties are becoming less expensive. Again, the effects were most pronounced in 2024. We found that vote center counties saved on average $2.04 per voter when compared to their precinct-based counterparts. I appreciate you all giving me the time to give you all this, and Dr. Kinsella is going to finish this out, and I promise you, he will not take as long as me.
I taught him everything he knows. Anyway.
He really did. He was my professor, so he really did.
So again, and you can see here where I unintentionally tricked Matt, and you'll see I just have like a couple of slides. But anyway, so what I wanted to do, we're starting to use, and I haven't completed the analysis yet on difference and looking at voter turnout between 2010 and 2024. So what we found, if you look at it just without adding any control values. So control values is a technical term. There are a lot of other things that affect turnout. Demographics, the people that are running in the election, how competitive the races are, if it rains that day, all kinds of different things that affect turnout. So we're adding all of those kind of ingredients to it, and we're still working on it. But overall, vote center counties, when we look at them by themselves without controlling for anything, they typically have higher turnout than non-vote center counties. But again, right now, it's like when we do, there's a t-test that just says, like, are these two things significantly different? It says that they're not. But anyway, so we can go to the next slide, and you can kind of look here. So we did turnout two different ways. We used a number of people who voted and number of registered voters, and then we took voting age people in the county and number of people who voted. And overall, what you'll see, again, so the vote center counties have a better turnout. The one thing that we haven't done yet, and we absolutely need to do, so what we're doing is we're taking the number, like for counties, three of the best predictors that political science has figured out, fairly recently on, if people vote is older people vote more than younger people. People with more wealth vote more than people with less wealth, and people with higher education vote more than people with less education. And again, that's kind of that's across the entire country. Doesn't matter which state you're in, which county, or anything like that. That's pretty much given. So we're adding those things in by county. We're also going to add in some competitiveness, in the counties for some of the different elections that were happening in the county. And so once we add all those things, I think it's really going to bring all of these things. It's going to control for. So again, right now, so it looks better for vote center counties right now, but as we add this in and we'll update this, I do think that there's not going to be a whole lot of difference between them in terms of turnout. Voter experience. So again, using that MIT data, we just did like a simple t-test, which again is like, are these things, we took two groups, people in vote center counties and people in non-vote center counties. Did one have a better experience than the other? And significance would be, it'll tell us in that t-test. And we used all of the years that were available from MIT. So we had 2012, 2014, 16, 22, and that's supposed to say 2024. That was hot off the press. They just got that finished, and we looked at that. Overall, there wasn't like a real big difference. I mean, good news is overall, no matter where you are, you had pretty good. And again, one of the things that they find with all of these election studies in MIT there's a guy named Charles Stewart there that runs this whole thing. Is people generally like the way their elections are run. So again, regardless, it doesn't matter if you're in Indiana, Alabama, California, or Massachusetts, where MIT is. Generally, people are happy with their elections. So we asked, there were a couple of different questions that are looked at. How difficult was it to find your polling place to vote? How well were things run at the polling place? How long did you have to wait? And then how was the job performance of the poll workers? Were the poll workers nice, essentially? And it's kind of interesting. So if you look at some of the early findings, that people said that they had to wait less in the vote center counties in 2012 and 2014, and then in later years it kind of doesn't. There's not a significant difference between them, and then kind of oddly in 2022. People said that it was easier to find their vote center their vote center as opposed to their precincts. But overall, you can see so anything with like little stars by it, those were significant. Anything without was not. And so, but overall, the experience, especially after by the time you get to 2016, the experience in vote center counties and non-vote center counties were not significantly different from one another. So people and again, they scored generally very high. So summarizing some of this, based on that, there's little difference in the experience, some of the early stuff, and then in 2022, people said it was a lot easier to find the vote center than than people in precinct counties. And again, just using that data that was available via MIT. And I think that is all. That is all. And again, you can see Matt did the yeoman's work here. And again, I remember it was like, hey, we can get this done in like a week. And I'll take the hard stuff. I'll do like the turnout, and you just do like the cost comparison. This is going to be great. And it was, but it was great. Matt ended up doing a lot more work than me. Thank you.
Thank you so much to our presenters. I am now going to turn it over to Secretary of State Diego Morales for a few remarks.
That was a lot of information, right? So I'm glad you came. Well, first of all, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for being here today. First of all, I'd like to thank our host, my good friend, County Clerk Ryan Lynch. Ryan, thank you for hosting this event for us here today, and I really appreciate your leadership. As well as we have other county clerks here in the room that I get to work with them, and I'm proud to be working with them. So thank you all. I believe we have Stephanie Rocky from Washington County, Michelle Shelton, Scott County, Amy Thompson from Jennings County, Amy Borges from Lawrence County. Thank you all. As well, I believe we have Mayor Treva Hodges from Charleston. Thank you for being here. And as well as Melissa Acton representing U.S. Senator Todd Young in the meeting. And of course, always good to see my good friend Fanny Braxton. Good to see you, my friend. As Indiana Secretary of State, it is both my duty and my privilege to ensure that our elections are free, fair, safe, and secure. We are here today because of House Enroll Act 1633. This legislation requires my office to study two important issues. First, the consideration of conducting municipal elections during presidential or midterm election years. Second, whether or not to use vote centers across Indiana. To carry out this study, the law requires us to hold 3 public meetings. Now, we want as many of our fellow Hoosiers to come to these meetings. So we have added a few more all across the state. So we look forward to holding more of these meetings all across the state. And during these meetings, we want to hear from you, fellow Hoosiers. We want to include the public opinion we receive in our final report for the Legislative Council, whether you are for or against moving when we hold municipal elections, or whether you are in support or in opposition to use of vote centers in Indiana. Since taking office, I have traveled all 92 counties, going to speak about election issues. Everywhere I go, I've been bringing up elections and possible changes to the election process because election impacts us all. And Hoosiers know best how we should run our elections. Today's meeting is the third of these meetings, and we are hosting these sessions to make sure voices from across Indiana are heard. We want to hear your opinion. As you see, our office has collected important election data from local election administrators across the state and from election administration and voting survey published by the Election Assistance Commission. We also collaborated closely with the Voting System Technical Oversight Program to ensure that our study was detailed. The information that was presented today, along with information we received from public comments, will come together in a report we must submit to the Legislative Council by November. Before I close, I want to take a moment to thank everyone who stopped at any of our booths at the Great Indiana State Fair. My office was once again the proud sponsor of the $2 Tuesdays, and we had booths set up every day on State Fair. We were there getting eligible Hoosiers registered to vote. Since taking office, we have been hard at work making sure Indiana continues to lead the way, and that is why I'm proud to say that according to the Heritage Foundation, Indiana ranks number 7 in the nation when it comes to election integrity. I am proud to say that under the Morales administration, we have put Indiana in the top 10, number 7. I can say promises made, promises kept. But also that is done by working together as a team. Your input is an important part of this process. Thank you again for being here today and your dedication to our great Hoosier state. You know, I brag about everybody that Indiana is the best state in the union. Now, I will turn it over to Sarah so she can give you more instructions for what's next.
Thank you so much, Secretary Morales. We will now move to the public comment portion of the meeting. You are invited to provide comments on the topics presented. If you haven't filled out or given us one of the slips, we will go around and collect those. If you haven't filled one out, they are out on our table out front. So if you want to make public comment, make sure to get us one of those slips. For purposes of the study and out of respect for other audience members who want to speak, please keep your comments contained on the topics being discussed. If you begin to go off topic, we will remind you of the topics that we discussed today, again, vote centers and municipal elections. If you continue to not provide comments related to the presentation, you will be cut off. We hope to include public comment in some way in the final report of the General Assembly. If before you make your comments, you have a clarifying question related to the data presented, we will answer those. Outside of those clarifications, for the sake of time today, we will not be answering other questions. You may ask questions as part of your remarks, and we will take note of those and do our best to get back to you. Again, that was the sign-up sheet out there. Put your email down. That will help us. Please state your name, county you are from, and who you are representing, if applicable, for the record. And to ensure everyone has an opportunity to speak, please limit your remarks to 3 minutes. We will call names one at a time from the slips. Please raise your hand, and a microphone will be brought around to you. We will start with Nate Adams.
Hi, my name is Nate Adams. I'm with the Harrison County Election Board. I had a question about, with regards to the early voting sites with the move to vote centers. That was something that had caught up our board in the past. I was wondering if you all might be willing to consider dropping the number of early voting sites from 2 to 1 for small counties, or have some stipulation about the distance to the vote center involved, so to allow more options for local control. I also had some clarifying questions regarding the municipal data. I was wondering, in your data, when you were looking at the cost per vote, were you looking at the votes obtained from actual votes cast, from voters or represented citizens, or something else? It wasn't clear from your presentation.
The data for election costs, it was all for votes cast and not registered voters, to provide the clearest data. Not like Matt said, not everybody votes, so using actual votes cast is the best data. So it was consistent across the entire study.
And one more clarification. Full study, you talked about down ballot drop-off for the small races. I know for my part, you mentioned that there's a potential confound with down ballot drop-off. And I know I found when I did a down ballot drop-off study in Harrison County, we saw very insignificant levels of down ballot drop-off in 2022 from the top of the ballot down to township trustee, and then much more significant down ballot drop-off from the township trustee to the advisory board position. But the drop-off from top of the ticket to trustee was in the neighborhood of 2 to 5% for most races.
Yes, wide. So county by county, it's going to be different. But I can just provide what the statewide data provides.
Margie Phipps.
Okay. Hi, I'm Margie Phipps. I'm from Clark County. I'm representing the Libertarian Party of Clark County at the moment. Thank you for the study. It did answer a lot of questions. One of the main questions we have, are we still in Clark County using the same ballot system, as we appreciate the paper ballots?
Thank you. John. Computer?
Just as a heads up, your county clerk is present, so you can feel free to have a conversation with her after today. She'll be and Ryan is here, so you have the election deputy and Ryan here, so feel free to ask them.
John.
Yes, I'm John Hutter. I'm in Clark County. My question is, all your studies and research doesn't mention anything about convenience for voters. You haven't studied any time that takes for them to get to the polls, if there are going to be fewer of them available, making it more complicated for the voters instead of easier for them to turn out.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that the best we could do in terms of collecting data. So there, some of the there was in Harris County, they had Texas. I should point out, they had undergraduates kind of asking people the different questions. But so the best we could do was go get that MIT data. So kind of like the ease of it. So that's the best that we could do in terms of trying to find the convenience of the vote. And typically what we found was it really wasn't all that different, but it is something that people do mention as something that is a major reason, for the use of vote centers. But, and again, the turnout, we're just using just the number of people who turned out, and overall there's not a huge difference. And again, that goes along with a lot of the other research that's been done.
And vote center plans are decided at the county level. So it is actually, each county gets the opportunity to decide where those voting locations are, how many they'll have, both for early voting and election day. And so I would say that it's going to vary, and it's going to be very hyper-focused on exactly what your county's needs are. And so, for example, if Clark County was looking to switch to vote centers, they would have a host of public meetings, they would have a plan that would be presented, and then the county election board would have the opportunity to vote on that plan and then get it approved by the state. So it is a very hyper-local process when you look at those voting locations and such.
Carrie Stemley. Sorry if I mispronounced your name. Excellent. I'll hold the mic for you.
I live in Clark County. On the topic of vote centers, feels like a reasonable idea, but I'd like to your point, see steps laid out to ensure equitable distribution of the sites. And I'd like to understand what that would look like before I saw that change made. I also would like to see us extend our hours to 7 or 8 p.m. I just think it's tough to get to the polls by 6. And I still think this ought to be a local controlled decision. On the issue of municipal elections, again, I'm concerned about taking it away from local control. I think the local communities should have the right to make that decision for themselves and not be forced. I'd hate to see municipal elections tied more to national elections. I think that waters down the important issues in our community. I also worry about a crowded ballot. I know that people want to get in and out, and there's a lot of diminishing returns there, so they're likely to skip those races, which would be paradoxical to the intent. I would like to see it combined with some election reforms to possibly eliminate some of these offices like surveyor and coroner that don't need to be on the ballots anymore. And also a big one, to eliminate straight party ticket voting, which I think is anti-democratic. Without these considerations, I would see this as more of a partisan exercise, but if that were to be healthily discussed, I would be all for that. Thank you.
Thank you. Treva Hodges. Treva, sorry.
Hello, I'm, as you noted, the elected mayor of the city of Charlestown, and I'm here in that capacity on behalf of the city of Charlestown. We have a bipartisan government in the city of Charlestown. We have an elected Democrat mayor, we have a full Republican council, and a Republican clerk treasurer. When these topics came up as a part of the General Assembly's decision-making this year, all of us talked about this, and all of us were opposed to moving municipal elections to presidential years. Our primary reason for that is because at the national level, the main topics involve things like the U.S. economy, immigration, abortion, foreign policy, health care. Our elections deal with topics like pothole filling, snow removal, parks and recreation. Obviously, these are very different topics. And what we know will happen with the amount of money that is funneled in through federal elections is that the local voice and the local options and the local concerns will get flooded out in those elections. That is unfair, that removes local control, and it separates people locally from the day-to-day matters that affect their lives most saliently. So for that reason, all of us were opposed to moving municipal elections. If it is an option that is given to cities and towns, which I believe small towns already have that option, that's separate because that gives that local control. The same applies for voting centers. I have great appreciation. You're drawing me back to traumatic memories of my statistics classes when I was working on my own PhD. And I have great appreciation for the amount of information that we have received today, and I thank all of you for being here and scheduling these events. However, what these statistics and numbers leave off are the qualitative answers. And we can try to look at numbers of why voter turnout is low over and over, but when you talk to people about why voter turnout is low, their number one answer is trust or lack thereof in their government. And so there's a lot more that can be done besides running numbers and statistics about how to get people to the polls. It also removes that little nuance of how turnout in Charlestown might be higher any given year because of who's on the ballot or what's on the ballot or who's not on the ballot. And I think it's really impossible to collapse all 92 counties in Indiana into one box. So I encourage you to focus on that local control. Thank you for hearing me today.
Thank you.
Sarah, I'm just going to say something real quick. And this is why not only hosting these public meetings, but also I've been reaching out to all the mayors, meeting with them one-on-one. We have reached out to your office. We try to meet with you. So I'm here to tell you, we're reaching out to everybody, going above and beyond the call of duty. When I became the Secretary of State, one of my goals is to increase voter turnout. I'm the one in my team going to local festivals, local county fairs, even at parades, chasing people, asking them, are you registered to vote? It takes less than 2 minutes. Go to indianavoters.com. Let me be clear, no Secretary of State has focused on grassroots and registering as many eligible Hoosiers. I'm the one who goes to the African American community. I'm the one who goes to the Latino community, to all communities, to the youth. We do voter registration. So I'm here to tell you, I really appreciate your feedback, but also I'm here to state the facts. First Secretary of State in the history of Indiana who's focusing on outreach on voter registration. But they have to be eligible And as far as I know, they have to be U.S. citizens. Only U.S. citizens should be able to vote in Indiana and America, period.
Okay, all right, all right, all right, all right, all right, all right, all right. Let's keep it nice. Chad Snow. I got it. I wish I had a gavel.
Thank you. Chad Snow, resident of Clark County, representing myself. I appreciate the work that you've put into these presentations, and my interest in this issue involve increasing and maximizing local control and maximizing voter turnout. And anything that can be done in support of those objectives, I'm in favor of. I was impressed by Mayor Trevor Hodges' analysis of the importance of separating local elections from the federal elections, and I support that idea. With respect to the implementation of voter centers, I'm concerned, as has been shared by others before, that the way it's rolled out and how and where those voting centers are located is of critical importance.
Thank you so much. Sarah Keenan.
Hi, my name is Sarah Kanonen. I'm a resident of Harrison County, and my concern about voting centers as a resident of Harrison County is how that is going to affect the elderly, disabled people, people of color, to be able to get to the voting booth. I feel like this is going to reduce people's ability to vote in rural counties. We need some data to see this, and this is a bad decision for Harrison County. Thank you.
Thank you. Tiffany Wolf Garcia.
Hi, I am Tiffany Wolf Garcia. I wanted to thank everybody up front for all their very hard work. I do not like math, and all the statistics are just wow. So thank you for doing that. I know it took a lot of time. I am representing the progressive voices of Harrison, Clark, and Floyd County. And I'd like to start off with a quote. Speak your mind even though your voice shakes, by Ruth Ginsburg. I was never a very political person. I can't be silent anymore. Not when my family, my community, and my state are being silenced. I voted Republican, I voted Democrat, I voted third party. I am an independent. And I know that my vote matters. Republicans know it too. But I've lost all respect and confidence for the Republican Party because they have manipulated the system to protect their power instead of protecting our voices. It's not just redistricting, they are restructuring local election timing, forcing counties to use vote centers instead of precincts, and moving municipal elections to the same year as presidential elections. Why? To drown out our local voices, to make it harder for Hoosiers to be heard. It is not democracy, it is theft. It steals our choices, our representation, and the future of Indiana. Excuse me. Enough is enough. Stop this redistricting, stop the restructuring, stand up for all Hoosiers, Republican, Democrat, and independent alike. Our voices belong to us, not to the politicians in back rooms with markers and maps. We deserve fair maps. We deserve fair elections. We will not be silenced.
Stephanie Rocky.
Hello, I'm Stephanie Rocky, elected Washington County Clerk. With that being we're election administrators if we're clerks of our counties. So when it comes to the municipal elections, of course, we're all structured, even though we end up at the same finish line, we're structured differently. In my county, we're one of the largest counties in the state, and then we're very rural. So when it comes to municipalities, we have one that is not on our election cycle, and that's the city of Salem. And also with our city elections, we are structured different. The city of Salem contracts my office out, being the county, to put on their election. We're a small office of 7. I am a working clerk, boots on the ground. So there are certain costs, actual costs, that we have to provide to this, our municipality, and it's actual costs. So it's every piece of paper, every piece of postage, every envelope, and so there's no upcharge, so we don't make any money, and actually it costs the county 3 to 6% to put on that election for them. So there's different variances, and of course, if they are on the presidential cycle, it could drown out, but there is different reasons. The reasoning is cost savings to the county and to the city of Salem, and I think it should be a county choice. On vote centers, I was proud in 21 to accept what I call recycled taxpaying dollars that came back to our county, a little over $250,000 of the equipment voting system that we took from the Secretary of State's office that was paid by taxpaying dollars. We also took on $75,000 worth of the e-poll books. We were the last 9 counties in the state. We were a paper poll book, and that made our elections run very efficient. One drawback is we are 100% paper poll book or paper ballot county. That was the push back in 21. Everybody was not in favor of electronic ballots, so we are 100% paper. So if we went to vote centers, which we have 3 major highways coming into Washington County, I do not know where everybody works. So I would have to have every scenario of ballot at every vote center I had in my county. My ballots are still 30 cents a piece, but my gosh, so when you see how much a vote would be if I was vote center, and I believe it would bring down the voter turnout. Because even though that we give voters every which way possible to vote, there's no excuse for not all 19,863 voters to vote in my county. We are there 28 days of early voting to come into central count. We have 2 Saturdays, and we have election day, and they can do mail if that's their choice, however they want their voice heard. So I think it should be left up to the county, to those voters. We're 92 of us. If we were all ran the same, if we were all the same structure, there would be 1 county in Indiana. So, I believe it should be up to the county and to their election administrators. I mean, I've been called the bulldog of elections. I was elected Republican, but when it comes to, I see my family here, my fellow clerks, and we live and breathe our elections, and it's not about the party, it's about the process. So you need to leave it up to our county. We represent our voters, so.
Thank you. Deanna Bryant.
Hi, my name is Deanna Bryant, and I live in Floyd County. And I just want to reiterate what Mayor Trevaha just said. I can't say that any better. And I want to agree also with the previous commenter about, I think counties know what they need to do. Every county is different. I live in Floyd County. We have vote centers. That seems to be working fine for us. But I understand that it may not work in Harrison County. They're far more rural than we are. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sarah, let me just share something with you. When I visited all 92 counties and I met with your local county clerks and many other local elected officials, I always encourage them to run their elections, to customize and tailor their elections according to the needs of their counties. Because you guys live in your counties, you know what works best in your counties. So I'm always going to side for you. That's me. This meeting is all about listening to you. We will put this report and take this back to the General Assembly. But I want to be on record to say I always encourage all 92 counties to run their elections to tailor and customize your elections according to the needs of each county.
Joe Kraus Graves.
I also want to address the moving of our local municipal elections to presidential elections. I truly agree with Mayor Hodges that that is taking away the voice of our local candidates. Our national elections, we all have to admit, they're nasty. They're ugly. We talk about each other. We throw mud, whether it's deserved or not, it's thrown, it's fine. By moving our local elections to that cycle, it's going to shut down public ears. Our voters are going to say enough, and I'm not listening to any of it. And I truly believe that will have a detrimental effect on the turnout in our municipal elections. You referred to down ticket drop-off. What is that going to do to down ticket drop-off? Because we all know those presidential and national elections are going to be on the top, and people are no longer going to care. I am a longtime poll worker. I'm in the polls every day. Floyd County, we vote the 28 days. We're a vote center. Our older voters, by the time they get to school board elections and the judicial questions, very often will look at us and say, do I have to vote for this? I don't know what this is about. I don't care. And they stop voting there. Please do not disenfranchise our local officials by moving that municipal election cycle. And all of you that are nervous about going to vote centers, I would like to invite you to come in and spend some time with us, not in the county clerk's office, but come out to one of our polling sites in Floyd County and see how a vote center can be set up and how they can work. Because I'm telling you, in Floyd County, they are efficient, and our poll workers move our voters through. And we have community groups that run church vans, they rent vans, and will go out into neighborhoods that they're worried about the voters coming into. They will bring a van load of senior citizens in, a van load of folks from public housing. We have nursing homes that bring their buses in and bring staff members to help residents vote. Come in and see how we run them and see how they can be good for you, because they're not as scary as I think some of you feel they are. Thank you.
Thank you. Heidi Sellers.
Hi, I'm Heidi Sellers. I'm from Clark County. I represent the Clark County Democrats and retired teachers. My first is a question, because I'm not fall. Are we OpScan or DRE?
Optical scan.
Next, the municipal elections do get moved. Do we decide by county, or is it a state decision whether they go with the president or with the terms? Meaning Mayor Treva might get a 5-year term or only a 3-year term if things could change.
This was a study assigned by the Indiana General Assembly, so it would be, we are just presenting our study to them. It would be up to the Indiana General Assembly on any potential legislation, where they put those elections, if they move them at all, and if they provide a local option. Currently, towns under 3,500 individuals can already move their local elections, and that is up to the local municipality.
Thank you. Fanny Brock.
Hi, Fanny Broxson, Clark County. I am the chairman of the Republican Party here. I'm representing myself today. I just had a clarification question, and maybe you've covered it. If the municipal elections were moved to either one of those years, how would that, and she sort of touched on it just a moment ago, how would that affect the terms, either of the incumbents or the newly elected? Would those terms change, length of terms?
I cannot confirm that. Obviously, the legislation would have to be written, and the General Assembly would have to decide. I know for the small towns, it's usually a holdover provision that the terms are extended by an extra year, and they're held over in the office until the next election, because Indiana code, there's a small section for local offices that until somebody else is elected and qualified, the person currently in that office holds over. So I believe it would just be a holdover provision.
I also just want to make clear that the VSTOP Vote Center study is not providing any policy recommendations, a stance neither for nor against or anything like that. VSTOP is a nonpartisan organization. We are simply here to showcase the data. So I just wanted to make that very, very clear that we are not, there will be no policy recommendations, no law changes, anything like that of the sort in the VSTOP report. It is simply just reporting our findings. So again, I want to echo that the state legislature is the one who will be making all of these decisions. We are not putting any policy recommendations or anything of the sort in our report.
And I'll reiterate that from our side for the local elections issue. We're not making any recommendations to the General Assembly. We're just providing the data that we collected and the information that we presented today to them, and it'll be up to them to make that decision.
Fanny, where was that? Are you done? Okay, thank you. Amy Thompson.
Hi, my name is Amy Thompson. I'm the clerk from Jennings County, and we are a optical scan right now, ballots as well, and moving to vote centers. I can say a little bit on, I believe, your statistics maybe over in one of the counties in Monroe might be the hills and hollers that we have, and getting to where people are so spread out. We're a farming community, and we have a lot of little churches that we use. And when we look at vote centers, it does look like it would be nice to organize and have all of our poll workers and just be able to go to 2 sites to check on that. But when we think of our voters, we think about those farmers that are out in their county fields and things and getting up to those vote centers. And anytime there's been discussion, that does come into play because we are here to serve our voters. We have used the super precincts where we can and combined, and that has helped us tremendously. And I would want to take that into consideration as well. Jennings County really doesn't have facilities to utilize for vote centers. I can only really come up with one, and that's not going to keep my voters happy. I would have to look at additional machines since we are paper ballots. We would have so many paper ballots within that vote center. The organization is what keeps our elections fair. We are very organized, and that would need to be taken into consideration. We would need additional equipment. I know that you have helped us tremendously, and you have heard us, Secretary Diego, and we appreciate that. Jennings County has been helped from you directly, and I know that you will hear us on that to make it fair and efficient and hopefully convenient. Was there any study done on equipment versus waiting times on the high traffic periods? Years ago, I did a small study, asked for one to be done, and they said, oh, you have plenty of equipment. And I said, now wait a minute. In what I'm looking at, you're getting those voters through nice and easy all day long, but in reality, we have people that need to be at work, and they need to be there by 6 p.m. in order to vote. Was that taken into any consideration?
It was not. There's a reason for that. We only had 3 months to conduct the study. The legislator did not give us a lot of time. And then when you look at the wait times, right, that is going to be so specific to each polling location. So that would require all 92 counties to report all of their voting locations. And so that data is not readily available, so that would require an extensive amount of groundwork. But I echo that. I love the idea of looking at poll worker hours or looking at wait times. I think that those are all valuable things that need to be considered. And so I do echo that sentiment. But unfortunately, with trying to get 92 counties with all of those voting locations and an average wait time for every single one of those can be quite a challenge. And the legislator gave us a very limited amount of time to do so. But I do echo your sentiment.
Thank you. Catherine Flowers.
Hi, my name is Catherine Flowers. I'm not an election official or with a particular party. I'm just a voter that lives like 10 minutes down the road. And found out about this yesterday. So I wanted to know, I had a clarifying question to ask. Is there a plan to put this data on the Secretary of State website and open it up for online comments so that Hoosiers would be able to say, in my county, this went terribly, and is that?
Yes, and I'll let Kagan develop a little more on this.
I believe we'll announce it at the end, but there is an email that we have set up that we'll be taking comments through. And we will be posting this to our website as well. So it'll be available for the public to look at, and then they can email us to the designated email we have set up. I believe it'll be shared at the end. I'll share it right now. It's electionstudy@sos.in.gov is what it is. We'll share that again at the end of the meeting. So yes.
And then I want to address the municipal elections moving to presidential and midterm election years. I echo what a lot of people said that it's going to potentially make it a lot harder for the local elections to be about local issues. I do think it's also a lot harder for people that want to get involved into politics to be able to break through. It makes elections more expensive for that. And it seems to nationalize and polarize every single time we go to the polls. And with regards to the voting centers, I'm in a family where my husband and I both work, and we both work on the side because we're part of the rural metro area. And if we did not have a precinct that was literally next door to where we drop our daughter off for school, we wouldn't be able to vote on election day probably ever. There's too much of a commute to be able to make that happen. So for that reason, I think that the voting centers are really going to, even if they don't have a specific numerical, statistically significant effect on voter turnout, it doesn't seem like it's going to be like a huge thing for voter turnout. And I appreciate what you said about like voter turnout being really important to you, but like we're the bottom 10 for voter turnout in the nation, and I don't see why we would want that to either stay the same or get possibly, even if not statistically significantly, worse.
Thank you. Kelly Coran? She's coming, sorry.
Hi, I am Kelly Curran. I'm a resident here of Jeffersonville. I want to reiterate just that strong preference for local control, that the state legislature doesn't give us a top-down requirement to move to vote centers, or even to change, well, I guess the changing dates would have to come from the state. I also have that concern of, in Clark County, we are on the optic scan system with paper ballots, especially given questions about elections. That makes it very easy to audit, eliminates the questions on whether things are hacked or anything else. And we have a strong preference to stay with our paper ballots. I would be interested in seeing or hearing more data on access that takes into account that demographic differences. It may be harder for some people to get further to a vote center. I'm among the ones, my precinct is literally across the street. I live in downtown. We have a lot of elderly and low-income folks, and for them to be able to literally be walking distance to their precinct means a lot. And mostly I'm just interested in more information and hoping that the studies continue and that the legislature doesn't do something major before more information is in.
Thank you. I have a couple of slips here with issues to discuss that were not the two issues that we're talking about today. I do still want to give you a chance to speak if you now have questions or comments about the two issues that we've discussed today, because I think these were kind of given at the beginning, so maybe there was some confusion. So if you have something to say about the two issues that we're discussing today, you can go ahead and say that. If you're going to try to talk about what's on this slip, then that would be off topic. Pauletta Orm? Paulette. Do you have something to talk about with the topic? Okay.
Thank you for this study, but I wondered, you mentioned that you were under a time constraint and that you couldn't study some of the issues, like the gentleman brought up, things to make it easier for voters to get to the polls and whatnot. Are you going to, when you publish this study, are you going to put in anything you did on those factors, or are you going to do another study in the future that will include some of those issues that you haven't covered? Because it seems to me this is mostly about, the voter center question as well as just a cost. You really, somebody wanted to know all about the cost of the elections, but it wasn't about getting more voters there, making it more convenient, adding more hours, various things like that that could have been looked at.
Yeah, House Enrolled Act 1633 gave us a very explicit thing. It said, you shall study the effects of cost savings and effects on voter turnout. Those were the two things that the study directed us to do. I will say that we do plan to include in our studies a list of limitations. So these are things, right, that we were talking about. Here are limitations to the study. That's how good research is done. You can't be perfect. So we do plan to publish a page of limitations in our study that talked about how some of these things could not be considered, and that, of course, everything on its face, numbers, are always more complex than they look. And so we do plan to include that. But we do not plan to do any additional studies or anything like that unless the legislature or the Secretary of State's office were to direct us to do that. Good question.
A bizarre one, but who came up with V-stop?
I think it was Brad King at the Indiana Election Division. I think they had a play in it. V-stop, yeah, it's quite the name, but it's better than saying Voting System Technical Oversight Program.
But Indiana, as people have said, we're almost 50th in voter turnout, so seeing something like V-stop, I think just goes against the whole
thing of what we're going for.
To get more
We
people
like
out
to say V never stop in our office because we're always busy and we're always doing work. So we like to say V never stop instead of V stop sometimes. So we can echo that sentiment.
Thank you. Rachel Kuhnhoff? Sorry. Do you have a comment about the topics? Okay, great. Oh, hang on.
Oh, great. I would like to not be recorded, please. I'm not opposed to voting centers as an idea. I think like a lot of things, it might look like really great on paper for some counties and might work for some counties, but may not work for other counties. I am curious if it ends up becoming a state mandated requirement that we go to voting centers, how that might impact other aspects of our voting process and our election days. So will we still have the ability to vote early? Will we still have the ability to mail in our ballots and things of that nature? So how will these voting centers change how we currently do our elections, other than reducing the number of places that our community members have an opportunity to vote at? I concur with Mayor Treva Hodges on everything that she said in terms of the municipal elections. We need a voice. It's important that we all have a voice, whether you're Republican, Democrat, Independent, Libertarian, whomever, whatever, you should have a voice in your election. And to move those to a general election would mean that those voices are lost or entirely silenced. And that is not fair, and it is not free, and it is not American. Secondly, it seems to me that if the concern is voter turnout, you would have given more time to the VSTOP folks to conduct a proper study that involves not just the quantitative pieces, which excellent work, gentlemen. I love data. I'm a huge data nerd. Love data analysis. Python's my thing. But you should have given them more time to truly study all aspects, not just the quantitative costs, but also the qualitative pieces that inform your constituents and our community members who vote. Thank you, and Diego, it's decent to see you. It's been a while, 25 years. We went to high school together.
Thank you.
Good to see you, Rachel. Go Dragons. I went to Silver Creek High School, so I'm proud to say, I brag about Clark County everywhere I go. When I travel all 92 counties, I tell you, hometown is Clark County, so good to see you, Rachel.
John Croucher. Okay. Sharon Neal. And you have a comment about the topics being discussed. Okay. Sorry, Lindsay.
Hi. Okay. As far as the voting centers go, I'm reading what Hamilton County had voted on yesterday and how they voted. I have a question on voting this. Who in the county gets to decide? Is it just the voting board or the election board? That would only be Ryan Lynch, that would be Troy Singleton, and then that would be Andy Steele. So therefore, it's already party heavy on one direction. So are more people going to be able to vote to see about that? The other question I have on voting centers, since Clark County is twice the size of Floyd County, and I get that Floyd County voting centers work because I've worked with enough teachers to know they love them. And but where I live at the other end of the county, so I'm almost at Scott County. I have people living around me that work in Columbus and whatnot. So they're not even in Louisville, so can they get to Jeffersonville or wherever these voting centers are going to be? So you have to look at some of the dynamics before a voting center would totally 100% take over. We got to have some precincts as well. It's got to be a healthy mix. Thank you, whoever said that. Thank you. A healthy mix, I think, because like I said, where I live, we even have people working in Ohio. They go up to Madison and go across the river. So, yeah.
Currently, for vote centers, as it stands right now in the state of Indiana, it is a unanimous decision. So both the Republicans and the Democrats and the county clerk must be in agreement. The plan is extensive. You must have public comment. You must have public meetings. You must do a study, basically. They kind of make the counties do a mini study on what it's going to take. You get the proposed voting locations. You get to comment on those proposed locations. They can have the chance to edit those. And a vote center plan that happens, so say, for example, Delaware County is going to do vote centers in 2026. If they didn't like the plan and they were like, hey, we need to increase some access here, or hey, this voting center was not even really utilized, they can change the plan next year. Okay, they can change the plan for the next election cycle. So as it stands now, it must be a unanimous, and it is an extensive process. I would encourage you, go to Hamilton County's election website, Allen County's election website, and Monroe County's election websites. They currently are in that process right now, and you can see the study and the extensive information, the public meetings that were held, and everything that goes into that process. But it must be unanimous currently as it stands. So if any member of the election board does not agree, the plan will not move forward. Then it must go to the state for final approval as well. So it doesn't just get approved there, it goes to the state, and the Indiana Election Division will approve that plan as well.
Thank you. Sue Wright. And you have a comment about the current topics. Okay. Give me a second.
Hi, my name is Sue Wright, and I'm president of the Jeffersonville Clark County NAACP. I'm here today to want to talk about, it's all about more about voter education than voter registration. And we've heard that today, even from Mr. Morales, that he's ran along getting voter registration. But if you don't have the means for voters to get out and vote and understand why they're voting, that's why our campaign is going to be a year-long of voter education. These policies, and let the minority community know. And again, now we're seeing the minority community has always known that there's a divide. But now everyone here in this room is seeing a total divide in our democracy, our country, and our civil rights. So I'm here today to say we need voter education.
Thank you. Sharon Neal. Oh, okay. I was like, I thought that name was familiar. Okay. Deborah Hoover. Left. And then I have one with no name. So if someone put in a slip of paper and didn't get called, okay, then that's it. Thank you all. Give me 1 second to get back to my seat.
Why are we talking about redistricting?
That is not, that's not one of the topics that we're talking about today, but thank you.
So let me just say this real quick. The General Assembly assigned us to focus on whether you're for or against vote centers and whether you're for or against moving municipal elections. Our job right now is to come here and listen, get all the information, and then put this in a report and submit this to the General Assembly. So we want to incorporate as many, and that is why we're here to talk specifically about these two issues respectfully. Thank you all for coming.
Thank you. Thank you all for being here. Thank you to those watching the live stream for joining in. Thank you again to our presenters for being here and giving us all that great information. If you were unable to attend this public meeting or any of our others, but would still like to make a comment, the office, as we've talked about, has set up a designated email. That email is electionstudy@sos.in.gov, and we will be posting that on our social media as well. Again, we are hosting 2 additional meetings, one in Lake County, one in Vanderburgh County, so be looking for that information as well. We'll post that on our social media and send information out about that as well. Our office must submit the findings of the study and final report to the Legislative Council of the General Assembly by November 1st. Again, thank you guys so much for being here. Yeah, of course. Okay, ready? Election, ELECTION, study, singular, STUDY, at SOS, as in Secretary of State, SOS.IN.gov, government, IN is Indiana. Got it? Yes. That is not part of our office or part of this meeting, so I apologize, but thank you all. We're not giving them out yet because we just may be making some changes as we go, as we get like